welcome to episode 107 of the Making a Marketer podcast. I'm Megan Powers with Event Marketing Partners, and this show is brought to you by my company, Powers of Marketing. My guest today is none other than the legendary Mike McAllen.
That's amazing. Thank you for inviting me and thank you for having me. And it's nice to see you. I'm glad you're healthy.
It's nice to see you. Yeah, I'm healthier. For those who have not heard, I have the dreaded. I have the Rona. I got COVID, despite all the things. But hey, man, I was really down for a few days, and then since then, I've just been tired. I've got some congestion and some coughing, but other than that, I shouldn't complain. The brain fog and the lack of smell is kind of a
That's
lingering
weird. The whole thing is weird,
thing.
and it's amazing how different
Yeah.
people react to it. Like my cousin's house last night, and he had it, and he had a slight sore throat and nothing else. And and then he had to, he confined himself to his house, and he was just there, he said, for a week, and like just not feeling bad, but he said he just cleaned his whole house. So it was a kind of a
I
positive.
haven't had the energy. I haven't had the energy to do that, although it really needs it. The dishes have piled up. There's no question there. But thanks so much. I know you're a super busy dude, so I appreciate you joining us. Happy summer solstice as well to you and all of our
solstice. And I always have time for
viewers
you,
and
Megan.
listeners.
So
Thanks
thank
so
you for having
much.
me. It's fun.
Absolutely. All right. So I am going to read your bio. Mike McAllen has been podcasting since 2007 and wants to give others a voice through podcasting. His company, Podcasting for Associations, helps associations and companies engage with their members and listeners on their audience's time and terms. Mike has had a varied career working as a firefighter, EMT, in corporate meetings, events, and media production. He lives in Oakland, California with his 2 dogs, 2 cats, his 5-year-old daughter, and his beautiful wife. So for those who are not watching the video, I am geared up in Warriors gear. I felt like I had to, with Mike on the show, represent our Warriors.
It was so fun, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, never gets old.
And the parade was nuts yesterday. There's like thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
Talk about a super spreader event. I saw those videos and I was like,
I know. I didn't go, not just because of that, but
Yeah.
I had other work stuff going on. But I was like,
Right.
It looked like pretty fun.
Yeah. The first video I saw was Clay Thompson tripping and knocking a woman over, which is unfortunate. That'll be a GIF, no doubt. Moving forward, there will be. He will not
holy cannoli,
ever.
Holy cannoli will be the big one.
He's so sweet. So, all right. So for those who don't know, I've known Mike for a few years now through the meetings and events industry. And he has been podcasting for years and now works in podcasting full time, as I mentioned, producing podcasts for associations and companies. And so I just want to say, like, for me, you're the OG podcaster in the meetings and events space, particularly. I think your meetings podcast was actually one of the first actual podcasts I ever listened to ever. So maybe you gave me a little inspiration as well. So let's start at the beginning. So was that your first podcast? Like, how did you get into the space? And let's share that story.
I got into it because I had an events production company putting on corporate events and meetings, and we do these, like for these big sales meetings, like for Sanofi or for Oracle or Genzyme. Anyway, all these, like, mostly a lot of pharmaceuticals, and then they would cut away a bunch of people at the last minute, like, we're cutting out, these people aren't coming, like the budget problems or whatever. They cut like 300 people. It was like a lot of people. And then I was hearing these podcasts, the podcasts, and I started listening to them, and I thought, what a great way to capture everything and not be the big expense of having video in it, because that, and you know how that goes. So just the prices could go way up. So I just kind of looked into this podcasting thing, and then I started one with my wife. We had this woman, a friend of ours, living with us, and we did a little kind of round table talking about stuff. It was fun. And then I started with my company. I thought, oh, I should try this for my company because I could meet people easily. So I could call up whoever I might want to work with and do an hour, talk with them, and then we would post it. And at that time, there was so many hoops to do to get it on something because we didn't have it on. Well, the iPod, it was before even the iPod came out. It was like you had to have like an MP3 player of some sort. No, maybe the iPod was out, but there was big hurdles to get it on your listening device, your MP3 device. So it worked out quite nicely. I started a roundtable one with a couple of guys, a guy from an AV company and a third-party meeting planner, and then we do roundtables, kind of a roundtable about the industry, and then we would do these ones where I'd interview people, basically. And that turned out to be quite a boondoggle because then I was like a media person at the events. And I remember going to I don't know, it was MPI or PCMA or somewhere. And I was like, yeah, I have a podcast. And they're like, what the hell's a podcast? And because I wanted to be a media person, I'm like, I'm interviewing people and stuff. So that got me into meeting all the media people, which was great, but also getting to meet all these people. So I was, and then I got a lot of referrals from it where I got a lot of work, and people would always, with podcasting. So I was like, how do you make money with podcasting? And it was like, that's how I made money with podcasting. It was like, I didn't need, and I didn't care if anybody listened to it too, which was the other thing. I didn't even look at the downloads. So we did the meetings podcast, and we did like more than 500 shows. It was like a ton, because we're doing it weekly. We did it weekly for 10 years, which was such a pain in the ass. It was so great, but it was like some days you're like trying to find somebody to interview, or because you get bogged down with work too. It's like a marketing thing. It's like, it's just even us trying to hook this up was like, oh gosh, I'm trying to get home. I raced home to get here for my, it's just funny how it goes. So anyway, that's where I started out on it. And then people started asking me for help, and I started doing them for other people, helping them with producing them, editing them. And then I run the podcasting group here in Oakland, which turned out to be the California Podcast Association, which we have meetings all over the Bay Area. We need to do them down south. But then I met all these people through that, and I'm like editing all these shows. And, we do some tech shows too. And I have somebody who helps me too. I have 2 people now that work with me. So we edit a lot of stuff for a lot of different people. But mostly I like to work with the associations. And that comes back from like when I was doing the corporate meeting stuff, because when I did have a couple of association clients, I really liked working with them.
Well, yeah, it's banked business. Like, it's guaranteed, right? Like, they're going to have an event every year. That's their whole thing. They have to gather. There's no like wiggle room on that, like there might be on the corporate side. So really, that's an amazing origin story. And what was the year that you started that meetings podcast?
I think it was like 2007 or 8 or something like that.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say. So they've become this shiny thing, that people have been wanting to dive into. And as a result, there's a lot of podcasts that have 10 episodes or fewer. Right. What do you think gives a podcast staying power or keeps podcasters going?
Well, there's a bunch of different things. I mean, if it's a passion project, it's just because you love that, whatever you're doing, then you do it all the time. If you're getting like, you are pointing at yourself for the people that are listening.
I was, for the audio.
Yes. But I think for, it is a marathon. It's not a sprint to get it going. So that's where people realize it is a lot of work.
Right.
And I think, I like the associations, working with them because they have that industry and they already have that audience and they already have the sponsors for the show. So everybody's there, everybody's there. But I think you either have to really love it or you have to really love your industry to produce a podcast. And it's hard to say why there's so many of them. Pod fade is what they say, right? So it's like when one goes away, it's pod faded. And that is they say there's 3 gazillion of them, but really there isn't. Just like you said, if you go on there, you'll look and see, I did that a lot of times when I'm showing people about, they'll say, oh, there's already podcasts in this industry, whatever it is. And go look it up on iTunes. Okay, they did it. Oh yeah, they have a podcast, but they haven't put one up in 6 years, or something. So it's it's interesting. I I didn't really answer your question, but that's kind of what I'm thinking is like, you have to love what you're going to want to do. You have to make it, just the right amount. Like the people always ask how long should it be? And it really just needs to be as long as it needs to be and no longer, because there is no secret time. So you got to cut out all the crap that's not good. Like you really have to make, because you know how the attention spans of people are short, and you just got to give them good information. And that's the battle of podcasting. It's like content. It's like get good content, and then it'll work. If not, it won't work.
Right. Yeah. And so, both my podcasts that I host this one and a new one called Trade Show Talk that I do for TSNN, both interview shows. But I did throw in a few just me talking to this podcast this season. No scheduling. I could record it at 10:30 at night.
That's great.
And I think as long as you have something valuable to say, it doesn't have to. It could be in any format. It doesn't really matter. And so for me, I only do those kinds of shows when I feel like I really have something valuable to share. And it started out as a passion project. I do think weekly is challenging. Now, having said that, I'm now doing 4 a month because I do 2 for each of my podcasts.
Wow.
But it's a nooks and crannies thing of fitting it in, where I can. But I love talking to people and hearing their stories and learning from them. I mean, truly, it's self-serving. All of it's self-serving. Like you were self-served by growing your business. Like, and people ask me that too. They say, well, I mean, how do you monetize it? And my first answer was, well, like that wasn't the goal. I just wanted to do an industry podcast and, the marketing space that mattered, like that people would listen to, that people would get value from, and people that I wanted to talk to and people that I wanted to learn from. And then consistency is, like you said, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Where this is the second to last episode of season 5 for us. And, for some people, they get to 100 episodes fairly quickly. Right. But I do feel like there's been value in every single one of our episodes. And I don't see an end to it just because I'm still really enjoying it.
Yeah. I think too, it's like one of the big things is being curious, because if you're thinking about someone fly on the wall listening to your conversation, you got to be really curious and figure out, ask lots of questions about whatever it is. That's the key to it all too. I mean,
for sure.
Learn if you're going to be listening to something, unless you're, doing a comedy one or something like that.
Right.
So,
yeah. And I do find that, sometimes I talk a little bit more maybe than I should, but some shows I just have a lot more to contribute than others, and then it's a back and forth between me and the guest versus just all doing preset questions that I have come up with. So
yeah, I think a combination of those is good too.
Yeah.
Like if you can do that somehow, like, and another thing I was going to say too is if you have a good format, how you watch the old TV shows, they had a format, like you watch, I'm dating myself with Happy Days, or like, they always had the same format. And if you do that, it makes people comfortable when they're listening to it too. I mean, it's good. You can throw other things in there, like bonus shows, like you're saying, but if you have people like that, like, a good format that's kind of, they know what's going to happen next, sort of, so if you do segments is a great idea, in your show. You can do dynamic content now, so you could keep stuff fresher, and the older ones like go in and say things. It's not as big of a deal having to edit it. You can pop things in and out. That's good for, of course, for ads and sponsors, but you can also like, hey, on Nick, we do Nick Borelli's podcast for the oh my gosh, All Seated, and like we're kind of playing around with him because him and this other woman is blanking on her name, but they do, they go on speaking things. So why not throw it on the front of all of the podcasts? Like, so you could, whatever one someone's listening to is like, oh, make sure to check out Nick at, he's at MPI in San Francisco, or speaking, come see, so that's kind of some cool things that have happened nowadays that people are doing, or we're doing with our clients, a lot of that kind of stuff. And you can also geolocate those things too, which is kind of cool. So if you have chapters in your association, you could do different. Someone downloads this in San Diego, they could get the chapter news from there. I mean, you can really go crazy with the dynamic stuff. not
Oh,
crazy,
wow.
but your mind starts to get kind of creative how you could do,
Yeah.
little shows. I mean, little like contests and things could go on all of them every month, and you have there's just people are fooling around with a lot of stuff with the content, the dynamic content stuff.
That's amazing. So you're doing that with your association clients,
Yeah,
like
we're
local
doing
chapter stuff?
we're selling ads. They're all making money, which is pretty crazy in
Wow.
a podcast, like because
Right.
they are so targeted that we just came back. It's been a kind of a crazy year because now everybody's doing their annual event again. So we've gone to all of them to capture um, interviews and stuff, and we'll have a little booth or we'll have like a little stage and do it. It's really great, and people could ask questions and stuff, and then you get so many good topics from the people in the audience because they're asking questions, right? And then you also can interview the members, and I've tried to kind of come up with a list of like, hey, what is the most important thing to your association? Is it the networking? Is it the education? Is it the that kind of stuff, the community? It's like, so then can you build off that with the podcast, to start it off? Or anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah.
But
So talk a little bit more about that on site. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, not at all. So
Yeah.
our clients are doing
How
a
did
bunch
they
of
get the questions to you? That was the first question that popped into my head.
well,
Like
if you're
on
on site,
site?
you have a stage in there. We just have an audience mic, or a mic runner.
Oh.
So you're
Oh,
actually
okay.
doing it there. Or
Right on.
at one of them, we interviewed people as they walked by the booth in between episodes. We asked questions that the client had already kind of written up. We talked to them about what would you, what do you want to know? So then we can plug those into the shows, or even have a show about a certain question. Hey, this is what Megan Power says about, so it's nice for them to hear, that's also the thing. If they can hear their names on it, then they start telling other people about the podcast. Hey, they talked about me on the on the podcast.
Right.
So, but they do. So, for example, one client just did. She's like, her name is Geraldine Warfield. She did 24 interviews, which are episodes at the 3-day event. She sat in a room and just but she had her own room that she just came in. We had, we set up for her, and they would just come in, and she did all these interviews, and she scheduled them all in between, which was amazing. I mean, that's a different way. And then one other client had like an actual stage right in front of the trade show floor when you walk in, and seats all in front of that. He's very personable and pulling people in. So he was like, he was talking to people. So when the podcast kind of weird, because he'll suddenly shout out to someone, hey, there's so-and-so. And you're like, oh, so anyway, those don't have a really long shelf life when you're doing that kind of stuff, obviously, but it's still pertinent information. Another one did like an enclosed booth. So the sound is good, which I didn't really like as much, but it actually was kind of funny because people were all standing around the outside of the booth, where I kind of like them open where there's seats so people can sit, and you can run a microphone around, and it makes it more, like doing like when you do your road shows, Megan, when you go all over the world with your road shows.
Right.
Your podcast road shows. Sorry, I just went off on a tangent there. But it's like there's a lot of stuff you can do with the on-site stuff for podcasting too, because it's all about getting content. So if you can kind of beforehand, like Geraldine did, was like she mapped out, series on different things, and then had the people come in to do the interviews on these different series. And they're pretty clever. It's the preventative cardio, excuse me. I know them as PCNA, and they are the preventative. Oh, I'm terrible. Nurses, the preventative carotid. I don't remember what their freaking name is. I should know my clients' names. All these acronyms, I just know them as PCNA. Anyway, they get grants for sections, so they'll get a grant for a bunch of episodes. That's kind of how they're doing it, which is very clever. So they'll do it on a certain topic, and then they get a grant to provide that to them. And now I have to go look up what the names are. I'm feeling like a complete boob right now. No, Preventative Cardiovascular Nurses Association, PCNA. Yes, and they're fantastic. But they have now banked, like they do 2 a month, so they've banked a whole year basically.
Wow,
which is amazing. Yeah,
as
you know, as a podcaster, that's like okay, you can go on vacation.
Right. Yeah, I hardly ever have more than one in the can at any given moment, just because, Well, also I just timely it's just kind of like what I got used to in the beginning is just having it be, like, more immediate.
Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be. I mean, because most of the stuff we're talking about is evergreen anyway. We rarely have a topic on that would like someone would listen to 2 years later and not and like it have it not be relevant to them. And
Right.
that's part of the goal. We don't do a lot of shows on like Facebook ad buying and stuff like we
Mhm.
have, but there it changes like on a dime. It's so fast that it's not as valuable. We want to talk strategy and things that
Right. Right.
long term that people
Right.
can
Right.
can
Right.
use.
Smart.
Yes, awesome. All right, so what has surprised you the most about producing podcasts for other people?
I think I try to cookie cutter it for my production process, and it just really doesn't work because people are so different. And that was my goal because coming from the events and meetings world, every single one is so different all the time, and you're doing everything you can. And I was like, okay, I want to do something that I just here it is. This is what you get. We do it that way, and it never works out that way ever. We're always doing all kinds of different stuff, but that's fun too. Um, I think that's one of the biggest things I've run into since doing it. But I've been doing it a long time. Things have changed. Like I'm amazed how easy it is to do stuff still, and how all the marketing things that are out there that you can slice and dice your episodes and make just gobs of content if you want. That's something that's very surprising. If you want to feed the machine of your social media, a podcast is
Right.
the way to go. You get a transcript, you start cutting it up, you do all the audiograms, and there's just a
Mhm.
gazillion things you can do, ebooks, and you can do all kinds of stuff. Some people are writing books from their podcast, so it's like they have the same format and they write a book from it. They publish a book, and that's kind of cool too.
Yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, uh, I need another person to do all that
Yeah,
stuff for me because, it's just like you say, there's so much, and especially when you're a one person team, it can be a challenge just to get the guests and produce the show and get them out there, all that kind of stuff,
totally.
for
And
sure.
it's funny because then I start meeting people to do that stuff, and you start partnering with people. It's like the events business. It's like you don't do
Yeah,
everything. You have all these specialists that come in and do that stuff. So that's really proliferated now that there are specialists that do all this stuff. Like
yeah,
Restream. Are you use Restream? That's what this is.
yes,
Restream. Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Every other show we do live and we use Restream, but the other ones that we record, we just use Zoom. Which I know audio purists are aghast at sometimes still, but, whatever.
Whatever.
I got a new mic that sounds nice,
Yeah.
so
What did
that's
you get
always
there?
a positive. Um, it's a, ATR
Oh yeah.
2100X.
Nice.
Yeah. Once I figured out because Zoom also just likes to change the out inputs and outputs and likes to make it a speaker instead of a
Oh,
microphone in addition. Yeah, so
nice.
I learned that the hard way. Let's talk a little bit about monetizing. You mentioned it, and you mentioned ad insertion. So, for anyone who's listening or watching this on the replay, who uh, doesn't know what that means, like, can you tell us a little bit? Talk about um, dynamic ads and ad insertion, and kind of how that works.
So, when we were doing it in the old days, or we still a lot of people do now, you record a show, you edit it, and you make a little MP3, which is like, what you would see on a CD, I guess, is like a
Hmm.
song on a CD is an MP3, I think. Um, Instead, you would do you can record it on a higher res, a better sounding file, and you could put that into the system, and then the robots will put markers in the actual um, file. Let's just say it's an MP3. They puts the markers in there, and then those are set, and then those markers now can drop things in and out of those markers. So you just tell the robots, "Hey, I want to put this ad in there," and put it in. You can geolocate it somewhere. You can have it run for as long as you want, as little as you want. You could have another ad behind it, which could pop in. It would pop out, and the next one move in. So it basically is a way to pull things in and out of your podcast
Okay.
episodes. Is that a good explanation?
Yeah, and how would one start doing that? on their podcast if they wanted to
They
add
just
that.
have to call me and I'll do it for them. No, they
I
it's
love it.
basically your
Always a
program
sales
that
guy.
you're using, and a lot of these programs will. I think all of the hosting programs will have this soon enough.
Okay.
A lot of people, a lot of the free ones won't have this kind of thing. But if I pay a good hefty price for my network of shows that I have, but I mean, it's well worth it. But I think it's the hosting program that you would use, and then a lot of them actually have ad networks attached to them. So you could just say, hey, am I making a marketer show? You have a little media kit, you show them this, and then they would give you, hey, how about this ad for something? And you could make money from that. It's usually a CPM model, which is cost per 1,000. So for every $1,000 you'd get, I think the average is like $20 or something, I want to think. So if you got, so you can do the math on it. Like if you get, it doesn't work out that well for most people's shows, but if you have a popular show, you can make some money. All those people like the Joe Rogans of the world are making gazillions of dollars from that.
Right.
But for me, for my clients, they're all very niche. They are not doing CPM. They can command to say, hey, this is what we charge,
Yeah.
kind of there's a lot of people doing a lot of different things with that too, which is very, some clever. I have a friend named David Spark who has this Sisu series. Sisu series is like Sisus, or like the security people for big companies. He actually lives down in San Diego area. He just started doing a podcast. He knows nothing about it, and he got the guy in the industry to do it with him, and he does all the production. And now he's the host. It's really great. But he sells ads on the show, and then he has the sponsor or whatever come on the show the last, after they've done so many, they get to be on the show. Of course, it's not an ad. It's like it's an actual, has to add value. It's not like an infomercial. So it's kind of a neat idea how he's been doing that. He sells those out all the time. So there is just a lot of different things you can do with that, the dynamic stuff, and ad selling ads. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I appreciate it. That was the thing I was thinking. Yeah.
Go down a rabbit hole. Well, but I like giving people like examples of what people are doing, because it kind of helps people go, oh, I should do that kind of a thing. So
absolutely. I mean, I just get people who are interested in potentially hosting a podcast. I always have conversations with them because they're like, ooh, I think I want to do a podcast. What what does it take? And I'm like, well, let's start with why. What are your goals? Like, what do you want to accomplish by having your podcast? And and it's a commitment, and a whole, talking about how you have to be willing to, to stick it out for a little while. You're not going to get a ton of downloads right away. Like the Trade Show Talk podcast, the client decided they wanted to launch cold, like as a surprise during PCMA Convene. And so what happened there was from square one, right? Like there was no getting downloads, a ton of downloads without having marketed it at all prior, was going to be a large feat. And we did well. I mean, all things considered, the show is doing very well. I'm considering how little it's marketed, sadly. But I think everyone is like, how do I make money? So like, and that's another thing. I was talking to somebody about this recently. I don't have a Patreon. I haven't done it. I have been asked a couple of times to sponsor this podcast. But then you get into, well, how many episodes is enough in order to garner X amount of dollars? And then I'm just like, we get the average number of downloads is 141 per episode is average for shows. And that's our average. Some shows obviously do better than others. But it's just an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, I have with my podcast group, I've had several people that do kind of value for value stuff too, and they sell like they have that like the Satoshis now. They have this whole like where you can, it's a very minuscule part of a Bitcoin. It's Bitcoin, and you can give people. They're starting this whole thing of how it'll be easier to give people. Oh, I like this show, and you just hit the button on the thing, and you give them $2. It's kind of an interesting little game. It's the Adam Curry. the Podfather, the guy from MTV. Well, you're too young
Yeah,
for
yeah.
that, but he's like, you know him.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Well, you look like you are. He's the one who came up with the podcasting. Like him and another guy came up with the RSS feed and the whole sending audio files. And so anyway, he has now come up with this as a way. It's called Satoshi's, and it's pretty interesting.
It's like an
value for
NFT.
value.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a lot of people are doing that now, just like you're saying, have a page and have all these different ways that people could give you something, and they call it value for value. There's a woman named Jen Briney. She has a podcast called, oh crap, what's the name of her podcast? But she's just all value for value. She won't take any ads from anyone. You go to her, she has a full-on page of, it's called Congressional Dish. So she reads bills that are going through Congress and then breaks them down and explains them. So she has a whole page, and her page is like really good. If Congressional Dish, if anybody wants to see that, like that's a great value for value page that she has. Another friend of mine, Drew Ackerman, has the Sleep With Me podcast, and it puts you to sleep. The podcast puts you to sleep, and it has a wildly popular following. And he does sponsors on the beginning of his show because everybody falls asleep in it. But he has a whole page too of how people, and he has Patreon. He has a Patreon, and he makes really good money from that because people appreciate someone helping them fall asleep, which is a funny thing that he's been doing it a long time. So anyway, there's some examples of like other ways people are making money, but the value for value is a big one for independent podcaster kind of people. So
excellent. And you are with your clients, you have a network, and so but you're still independent, and those are considered independent podcasts, right?
Yeah. I just, there are associations, they're all in the ad network. It really doesn't work. I haven't really been able to find like the nurses and a dental podcast. Like, I don't know we can sell ads across all of them, but you can also join a network of, like I was saying in your hosting program, you can join their ad network and get ads and have like mattress things and, Me Undies and those kind of commercials on your podcast. So that's what other people are doing. So that's kind of the ad networks are that way. My network is basically association network shows is what we do.
Right. Yeah. My friend Troy Sandage, his podcast called I Digress is on the HubSpot network.
Mm-hmm.
And HubSpot saw an opportunity there with
cool.
people in the industry who were, who had great shows. And so then they've kind of pulled them together within this own network that they developed.
It's smart. And then the best way to kind of get your podcast to marketed is to do a drop with somebody else who has a podcast. And like, you could either, trade like, hey, listen to this show, you could say it about some other marketing show. And then, and then the other thing is to put a whole episode down the feed, and then you introduce it, and say, hey, those are the two best ways to get more listeners to your podcast. It is the best way.
It's proven
by the scientists of marketing. I think it's like there's a guy named Sean Howard who runs a Fable and Folly. They're like, what do you call those? They're like, story podcasts about like fantasy stuff, and they're really cool. But he is brilliant with his figuring out the if you ever want to know more about selling ads, I would look up Sean Howard from Fable and Folly. He just has come up with all sorts of clever ways to, and that's, people don't download a ton of those either, so he's kind of come up with a way. He has a network of those shows, and he sells them ads across all of them. So interesting.
Yeah, it kind of feeds itself. We have a friend of the show who's the only other show we've done in 107 shows on podcasting was with Eric Fisher, and he has a podcast called the To-Do List.
Yeah.
And it's like 20,000 downloads a month. So he has an agency. He got approached
right.
We want to help you make money, and of course they're making money.
Yeah, he's great. I've seen him speak a couple times. He's a smart dude, really smart guy.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So if you're listening to this, go ahead and look back for Eric's episode as well. And the thing too, like you say, marketing show, promoting marketing show. That might be counterintuitive to some people, but I agree that we elevate that more, that podcasts are being seen, the more that we are all showing value in what we're providing, then I think it's good for everybody. I think that's good. I think that's true with any kind of business. Like people
Yeah.
go, "Oh, we don't want competition." It's like, well, everybody's got their own special sauce, and
Right.
I don't
And you
consider it
and you know what's
competition.
funny too is like people say, "Oh, how do you make money with your podcast?" It's like when someone's doing a blog or something, they don't ask you how are you making money with your blog? Like it's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like this always like, why do you have to make money? Just like you said with your goals. It's like, this is just for
Right.
fun, or I really love this industry and I want to talk to other people that love, horses or whatever it is, It's
Right.
it's interesting.
Yeah. So, all right. So we are, we're over time, which, I knew was going to happen with you, but I do have a couple, two quick things that that I still want to cover. One is, if someone wanted to start their own podcast, how do you
Mhm.
suggest they get started? Like what's
I
step
think they
one?
should go to Anchor. It's a free app on your phone. It's Spotify owns it, and I would try it out. Just try making a podcast. You could do it right this second. Download the Anchor app and do it and try it. Do a show for 10. It doesn't matter. I mean, no one's going to be listening. But it's like you learn, how it is when you start doing these things. It's like, you want to try it first. Don't go out and buy a bunch of equipment. Don't bother doing that. It's not really
Right.
worth it. Just sit down. The big thing to do is sit down, like you've said a couple times now, is figure out your goals on it,
Hmm.
figure out your topics, pick the best topics, and then start working on it, and then start putting your shows together, because it is all about the content. So if you want to start a podcast, just spend your time. Don't worry about any of the podcasty stuff. Just worry about what your shows are going to be and spend all your time doing that. And I think that would be, that's my advice.
Smart. Super smart.
And if you want to buy all the equipment and stuff, go on YouTube. You'll see the ATR, that you have, and the Shure mic that I'm using, that you'll see that's all the same people use. I mean, I use a Procaster, a Rode Procaster for doing stuff. But I mean, there's just all sorts of crap you can buy. It's just, it doesn't really
Yeah.
matter. I mean, you could do it like,
Right.
Easily on Zoom. Start on Zoom. Do your interviews on Zoom and start out that way. It's just the best way, because you're never going to like what you start out with.
For sure. And now, like in early days, because I've been at this for like 6 years, on Zoom with another show that I hosted. Also, like the audio is a separate file. It used to be you used to have to pull the audio from the video,
Oh yeah.
but now they give you both, which is pretty cool.
That is cool. When we started the Meetings podcast, we used a free conference call line, that company free conference call, and we'd use that, and then they would send us an MP3. You could get an MP3 from
Oh,
that, and it was just literally a conference call line. Funny.
nice. Wow. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they were our first sponsor. Then they wanted to charge me. I was like, "Well, would you like to be our sponsor? I'll mention you every time to our 4
Right.
listeners."
You had more
In
than
fact, I'll
4
call them
listeners.
individually and say, "Hey, check out this."
I love it. All right, that's perfect. Okay, so and then our last question we like to ask our guests is, do you have a business book that you can recommend to
Yeah,
our
I do. I got
listeners?
2 of them. This one I think is my favorite book. It's called The E-Myth Revisited. E-Myth? Have you ever heard of this?
No.
It's all about processes. It's by Michael E. Gerber, and it's about putting processes together for your company, so you're not working in your company, you're working on your company. And after I read this book, it changed everything. Like changed everything. And I will recommend this book. The E-Myth. It's called The E-Myth, and this one's called The E-Myth Revisited because they rewrote it. So
Right. Yeah. Follow up. Very cool. Actually, yeah. Now that you mentioned it, I think I did see you post about that on the LinkedIn.
I know, and I
So
was happy for that because
very
you
cool.
just asked me bring a business book, and I was like, oh, I
Yeah.
just did that. Yeah. Oh, then I have one other one.
Fabulous.
So
Yeah.
if you're gonna do a podcast, this is a really cool book. It's called Make Noise. It's by Eric Newsom, and it's a great book. I mean, it's kind of nerdy, podcasty nerdy, but you can see all the pages I folded and all the things I have in here. So
Yeah.
I recommend any podcaster getting this book, Make Noise, A Creator's Guide to Podcasting and Great Audio Storytelling. Just some really clever stuff that I've molded into my whole business when I talk to my clients. it's a really great book.
Fabulous. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing too. Someone told me, said, "Well, you're a creator." And I was like, "I am. That's what I'm not just a podcaster. I'm a creator. I'm creating content with our guests and as a, service to the
Yeah.
world." So that's pretty badass if you ask me,
Yeah, it is. It
right?
is. It's fun.
Well, Mr. McAllen, I really appreciate you. And ironically, I think it's WEC in San Francisco right now, which I think probably I met you at either WEC or at IMEX. I'm not
Probably.
sure when.
Yeah,
It's
I don't remember
all
either.
those years ago. So happy solstice, happy WEC. I mean, you're probably not going, but
Happy. Yes. Thank you so much for
happy.
the opportunity to speak with you on your fabulous podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you so much. All right. And if you are listening to the podcast or watching the replay, thank you also for joining us. And if you have any questions for me or Mike or Eric, any of our podcast friends, please send them our way. Our Twitter is at Make a Marketer. And you can DM us on there. All right, friends, this has been episode 107
Wow.
of the Making a Marketer
Nice job.
podcast. Thank you. And we will catch you